The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply reports. Now he reports.
The Committee of the Whole House on Supply has made some progress, and begs leave to sit again.
Thank you. We've reached the moment of interruption, and we will now proceed with late debate. The motion is under Rule 5.5. Late debate topic is therefore be it resolved that the Minister of Education immediately recognize the $65 million in education cuts undertaken by her government over the past 2 years is more than a family disagreement, and that families from Neils Harbour through to Tuscott will make a permanent decision on her government's future in the next election. This resolution was submitted by the Honourable Member for Hants West, and I would recognize the Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise this evening to speak to this resolution that the Minister of Education immediately recognized the $65 million in education cuts undertaken by her government over the past 2 years is more than a family disagreement, and that families from Neils Harbour through Tuscott will make a permanent decision on their government's future in the next election. Madam Speaker, over the last year, we've seen 128 teacher cuts and 425 maintenance, consultant and support staff cuts. While the government has increased their full-time equivalents by 553 people. And Madam Speaker, these over 500 people who have been cut have spouses, family members, and children who are of voting age. And when these people lose their job, it usually shows up in the following election, especially if they're not able to find other positions anywhere else. Now this year we're hearing of cuts again, this time TAs, library, IT staff, property, transportation, and office staff. And for to add them all up again, and their families and spouses, we're talking a large number of people. Not only that, we have adult schools that are being affected by the cuts to the education system, and they're all voting age. Now, Madam Speaker, as we've seen here today, there was a number of teachers from all over the province that are concerned about our education cuts. Cuts that will affect our education of our children, and we've heard a lot from families who are really concerned about the education cuts and their children being affected. We know that investment in knowledge always pays us the best dividends. And Madam Speaker, investing in our children's education is a way to move our province forward. We're hearing numbers of the House of increases of $10,000 up to $10,300 in funding for each student, and a decrease in student numbers. Madam Speaker, if these cuts are taken, if these numbers are declining in enrollment, and the funding is not being changed, of course it's going to look like the funding per student has gone up. If the number of students is down and the funding remains the same, it's got to. Mr. Speaker, the NDP cuts are devastating. Madam Speaker, sorry, the cuts are devastating. We see kids protesting, teachers and parents are protesting. We're hearing people come to the legislature. All Nova Scotians are appalled by the action of this government in recent days with the possibility of the healthcare strike, education problems. Something has to change. And Madam Speaker, we're hearing from the people of the province that the thing might change, might be this government. If I look back through the funding, we look at the removed public school funding from the estimates of the Department of Education, we see that there's actually a 3.9% increase in the Education Department's funding. How can they cut the education funding to schools but increase funding to their own department? Our children's classrooms are being affected, and they're being heavily affected. Madam Speaker, I spoke with one gentleman who has a child with a special need in my constituency, who last year spoke of his child having a full-time TA. Now, this gentleman has a child who's what he calls a runner, who's a flight risk. He could at any time get up and just run out of the classroom, hence the idea for the full-time TA. In about October of last year, he found out that the school board had cut the TA in half. And in trying to deal with that, he was told the funding was the problem. So he comes to my office and he asked me about it, and he's pretty upset because the school his child goes to is right on a major roadway. And if he was to get up and get out of the classroom as a runner, he would be into the traffic and be concerned about that. So he tried to explain to me that the TA that he had was 100% funded, but when they cut it in half, that his child didn't have a learning disability or a disability half the time, that he needed the TA full time. We're also hearing about maximum numbers of elementary school classes going from 27 to 29. That would give us one of the highest caps in the country on education in the lower grades. And if we're hearing about the decreased cuts in the classroom, or the decreased students and increased number of teachers, why do we have to raise that cap system? Madam Speaker, the education system is arguably the most important part of our economy. And let's be clear that most of our children are our most valuable resources. We talk in the legislature here about wind power, resources, gold, mining, forestry. We talk of these resources and we're trying to develop them as best we can. Valuable resources that will bring wealth to our province. But Madam Speaker, we have children out there who I argue is probably our most valuable resource. And we're cutting money to the education system. But we'll put money into developing mineral resources and take money from the education system. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I think there's a problem with that, because I know that our children with a good education are the future of our province. And without them growing up with a proper education, a useful and meaningful education, our future will be lost. The shipbuilding contract that we look at in the future may go because of that. We need an education system that prepares our children to do whatever they strive to be, to allow them to fly as high as their ambitions will take them. I feel like a decrease in the education funding will prevent some of our children from flying into this future. As we know, knowledge is an investment that will pay us dividends down the road. Our shipbuilding contract, any new major industries that may come to the province. And we know that education provides such benefits as decreased reliance on the healthcare system, decrease in crime, better employment, better interpersonal skills. We need to allow our students to achieve whatever goals they want, be it a skilled trade, which we've talked a lot about in the House. And we are putting some money into the skills trades program, but at what cost? At what cost to the regular education system? We also need to take advantage of the shipbuilding contract, but we need to prepare these people for education, university education, because we know that we're going to need managers, engineers, supervisors, as well as the skilled trades people. As we've been seeing, cuts to the education budget have been pretty good strain on our school boards, on our families, and it's putting people in an awkward situation. We know in 2011, we saw cuts of 2.4% to 4 of our school boards. And now in 2012, we're seeing 2.1% more to 3 or 4 of these boards. They're being forced to make cuts that may affect our children. Cuts to teachers, support staff, TAs, and it will affect our education in one form or another. Madam Speaker, we don't want to balance this budget on the backs of our children. These school boards are making difficult cuts. And if we're taking TAs and other valuable education assistants out of the classroom, we're taking away our children's education. Madam Speaker, safety and education of our children has to be preserved. Over the last 2 years, we've heard of cuts to the tune of $65 million. We know that due to the decreased enrollment, there needs to be some cuts, but do we need to go beyond that? To balance the backs on our children and our education system is just wrong. And Madam Speaker, we know the people throughout the province who put us here can very easily vote to take us out of here. We need to protect the system in this province that our children rely on, and for a good quality education they deserve. Madam Speaker, the people will get out to voice their concerns and opinions, and the decisions of the government we see will happen during the next election. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And may I have permission to make an introduction, please?
Certainly may.
I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the gallery opposite here to welcome Gordon Goss Jr., who's sitting with his father, the fine Speaker of our House. I wish everyone here to give him a warm welcome.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. I'm pleased to rise in my place to speak to this motion, but I want to begin by setting the record straight on an incorrect number that both parties opposite seem to be wanting to be able to repeat over again. Madam Speaker, the Department of Education has not cut $65 million over the past 2 years. Last year, we reduced funding to school boards by $17.6 million, and this year we are reducing by $13.4 million. And I would also like to add that the Department of Education has made reductions. They have not increased any of the funding at the department. We are doing exactly the same we're asking boards to do. I want every member to be clear on the math. It is well under the $65 million, less than half, in fact. The average reduction this year was 1.6%, which is below the provincial enrollment decline of 1.7%. On the subject of math, I want to remind members opposite of some numbers that are accurate. Even as we make reductions to reflect the reality of our student population, we have maintained the lowest class sizes in a generation and raised the per student funding to its highest level ever. Madam Speaker, there are 30,000 fewer students in our system than there were 10 years ago. And at the same time, there are now 300 more teachers in our schools. During the past decade, there was a trend, and I want everyone to be clear on this, there was a trend for every 100 fewer students, one teacher was hired. Past governments have had no problems with the trend, Madam Speaker. In fact, they increased spending by 42%, even as enrollments continued to drop. I think it's obvious to most Nova Scotians that it would be irresponsible for us to keep this up. In fact, the Truro Daily News wrote the following in an editorial today. School board budgets have continued to climb in recent years despite declining enrollment, and it makes perfect sense to us when the government, regardless of affiliation, says this can't continue. And Madam Speaker, I will table that article. It makes perfect sense to many Nova Scotians that we cannot continue on the same path. Not only is it not sustainable, it's not working. Assessments show that our students are not making significant improvements in math and literacy. In some cases, they are actually losing ground. In other words, Madam Speaker, previous governments spent more money on fewer students that got mediocre results in return. And I don't think any parent in this province is satisfied with that equation. And that is why this government is showing the courage to face the facts head on and make hard decisions. And through our Kids and Learning First plan, we are providing a vision to do things differently. Madam Speaker, we are taking a balanced, coordinated approach to address the changes that must happen in our education system. We are ensuring that resources are directed to students first, and we are working to support effective teaching in every classroom. This week, we invited the Nova Scotia Teachers Union to work with us on a partners group that will make sure that teachers are teaching to their strengths and are not assigned to courses where they don't have the background or experience that they would like. This group will also look at professional development to ensure we are giving teachers the support they need to help students achieve better results. Madam Speaker, I look forward to working with our partners for the benefit of students and teachers alike. Madam Speaker, we are expanding our virtual school to make sure students have access to courses they might not be able to have in their schools, particularly in our rural areas. We are doubling the number of high schools offering skills trades program so our students can gain hands-on experience that will prepare them for good jobs and grow the economy. And I'm disappointed in the members opposite in not agreeing that this is a good way to invest in our students by providing them the resources that they need to be successful in our 21st century economy. We are working with other departments to make sure children with autism spectrum disorder have the support that they need before they start school, in the classroom and in their communities. And this brings me, talking about preschoolers, to the Play, Talk and Learn resource which members have mocked, which I find disappointing. This is a resource that we're providing to all of our children as they're coming to school for the very first time. It has books with print, without print, so that there's actually 3 very high quality books, a CD, and activities for parents to engage with their students to play, talk, and learn. Teachers have reported that children are coming to primary school with the inability to have a conversation. They understand language, but the responses are yes and no and maybe a nod of the head. But involving children with rich literacy experiences before they come to school. We're investing $35 per student, our preschoolers, with that resource. The past government did a similar program called Welcome to School with different resources in them for the tune of $32 that only went out to 4 school boards. We're making sure that every student, as they enter school, will get this resource. It is passed over to the parent, and the teacher and the parent have time together to talk about how to use the resources. Every child for the next 3 years, it's been budgeted for the next 3 years, receives this resource that is packaged in a bag that can be reused by the student, not the tote that had been purchased by a private company in the past. This is done in-house with the support of the literacy teachers that talked about what children need and different activities that they can engage with their literacy development. Madam Speaker, these are targeted, focused actions to help our students succeed in a rapidly changing world. We are making sure that we are reflecting the realities that we are facing as a province, demographically, economically, technologically, and socially. Madam Speaker, previous governments tried to spend their way out of a solution, and I hear, yes, they did put a lot of money in, but we are not seeing the results. We are making sure that we are investing students. It is strategic, it's targeted. Madam Speaker, we are going to make sure that our results for our students are very clearly going to be improving. The past governments chose an easy road. We're not. We are not taking an easy road, and we are making difficult decisions, but we are putting our students first. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to talk this evening, to talk about what is most important in Nova Scotia, our children, and the investments that we're making in their future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and perhaps you could tell me how much time I have before we close debate.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Thank you.
Each speaker is allotted 10 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today and speak to the issue of funding for public schools and for the disappointment, dissatisfaction, anger, disrespect, whatever you could call it, that people are feeling from this minister and this government. We saw it demonstrated, Madam Speaker, here in the House today. We had members of the minister's own profession, my profession, teachers, who were here, who were here on behalf of the students in their classrooms. And Madam Speaker, they had asked the minister and all members of caucus to sign the petition, Kids Not Cuts. It was quite a slap in the face to those teachers to know that the minister, who was supposed to be representing them, who was a member of their profession, chose not to sign that petition. Secondly, this is the same group of teachers who had invited all MLAs to participate in a Take Your MLA to School Day. And again, another slap in the face when the minister, the premier, and others in cabinet and others in the caucus had made a decision not to support that initiative. So it's not surprising, Madam Speaker, that today, when the minister came out with her comment that teachers support teachers, but she supports students, that they stood up in mass, Madam Speaker, and they walked out. They walked out of this gallery because they are so discouraged, disappointed, angry, and reeling from the lack of disrespect that they're getting from this minister. So if we're talking about what's going to happen in the future, the minister is doing a great job of alienating people who should be her allies. They are members of her own profession, and they have walked out of this House today basically saying the line has been drawn in the sand. We were here to support, we were here to work for kids, we're here to speak on behalf of kids, and this is the reaction and the response that, and the support, or lack of it, that we get from the minister. When the minister is trying to explain the 65 million, she only goes part way, Madam Speaker. She talks about 17 million last year, 13 million this year. We can all add, that's 30. But what the minister has failed to do is to articulate to the public the other costs that school boards have to incur in order to deliver the programs that they've been asked to deliver. The inflationary costs, the increase in wages to teachers, all of those costs add up. The minister would know this if she would listen to boards. They're telling her, we have additional costs of about, provincially, $35 million. So you add 30 and 35, it's not hard to get 65. So I think it's important that people understand where the 65 comes from. And it's not an imaginary number, it's a real number. You know, I met with some school board members, I meet with them often, and one of the board members said, you know, we have no relationship with this minister. She doesn't talk to us, she doesn't consult with us, and if that would happen, the minister would know the extra burden on school boards in order to meet the budget or live within the budget that they've been given. And she would well know that a 1.7 or a 2% decrease in funding plus inflationary costs in many boards is coming to between 4 and 5% fewer dollars that they have to deliver the program that they're required to deliver. So I think it's important that we get both sides of that story. You know, the minister talks about she's extended an invitation to members of the teachers' union to work with her and to work with her department. I would suggest, Madam Speaker, she might have been wise to extend that invitation and to get a response before her response to them today. They left this gallery, they left this building feeling very discouraged, very angry, and really feeling disrespected by the minister. You know, I want to speak a little bit about the costs to deliver programs in the public schools. And I'm proud to say that when you recognize the diversity within the classroom, and when you recognize the importance of programming designed to meet the needs of that diverse population, you have to put more money into the programs so they can be delivered. You have to look at, and you do look at, if you understand education, that many of those students' needs are met through a program that may be a one-on-one intervention. We know And the minister should know that many of these students who can be captured and supported and assisted during the early years of their schooling will be able to pick up the skills they need to become fluent readers and to move on. But those are costly programs. And the cost of not doing them, Madam Speaker, is exactly what this resolution speaks to. It's families whose children will lose the opportunity to be successful. They will lose the opportunity to maximize to their full potential. And we know that if students have not been able to acquire the literacy skills that they need by the time they reach the end of grade 3, that they will struggle and in many cases be unsuccessful, both in their academic program through a schooling and when it comes to employment after schooling. So it is important, and I would be very proud of any government that would recognize that and would put the money where it should be, and that is in the early years of schooling, so those students don't fall behind, so they get the skills they need, and those are costly programs. This whole business of making a mockery out of declining enrollment says to me, and it says to everyone in Nova Scotia, this government and this minister fail to recognize that the importance of delivering programs to students should be based on meeting programs that would meet their needs. It's not a mathematical, it's not a business model, it's a model based on student needs and funding the programs that are required in order to meet those student needs. So the whole business of talking about declining enrollment, you know, maybe they believe that people will buy that. But most people who understand how students learn, who understand the importance of education in the early years, will recognize that declining enrollment should not be what determines the funding for schools. What should determine the funding for schools, Madam Speaker, is the program that is needed in order to help students learn. If we can't, as a 52 members of the caucus, come together to agree, or 52 members of government, to come together to agree that the most important resource that we have in this province are our kids. All of the economists that you read will tell you that the one place you should not cut when you're looking at your budgets is education, because education for our students as they graduate from high school, as they go on to become employees in our province, as they contribute to the tax base, if we don't have students who are well educated, who can contribute to the economy of the province, then we will have not only failed the students, but we will have failed our province, because we will not be able to move forward into a positive economic climate if we don't have the benefit of a highly trained, highly educated, and employable workforce. And what this government is doing is saying to those people, well, if you happen to be in grade 2 and you don't happen to have the support you need, tough. Well, Madam Speaker, this member and most members in this House would not accept the fact that we can say to our students, too bad, we have a responsibility, and Madam Speaker, we take that responsibility seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. The time allotted for late debate has elapsed. I want to thank all members for participating in this evening's debate. I would now recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville, Acting Deputy House Leader, Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I do now ask that you leave the chair and resolve the House into the whole Committee on Supply.
Motion is carried. Order, please. Committee of the Whole House on Supply will come to order. I would now recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville, the acting deputy government House leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask you to call Resolution 13 and Resolution 14.
Thank you. We're debating Resolution 13 and 14. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North with 1 hour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Minister. I have just 3 or 4 questions before I turn the floor over to the member from Victoria the Lakes. And if they involve employment around disabled individuals in the province.
Actually, no, 6:20.
My background as a healthcare worker has led me into some situations where employment services for disabled individuals have been asked of me. I see on page 15.4 the Employment Nova Scotia budget has been decreased, and I'm just wondering if the employment services for disabled individuals are going to take a decrease as well.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to explain that those programs are funded through the federal money that comes to us, that's devolved to us through the Labour Market Development Agreement. And the formula is based on population in Nova Scotia compared to the relative population of the other jurisdictions. And so other provinces are increasing in population, and so that affects the amount of money we get through that agreement. And, you know, we're not anticipating that there will be any direct impact on persons with disabilities, but we have to recognize that we're working with less money, and we just have to be very careful and strategic in how we allocate it. We fully recognize that we have some untapped potential in terms of future workers in this province, in terms of women, First Nations members, African Nova Scotians, and persons with disabilities. So a lot of our focus over the next few years is going to be providing supports and training programs for those marginalized groups, because we're trying to support them to get attached or reattached to the workforce. So even though we have less money coming in, they are an increasing focus and priority for our department. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we've been seeing is some of these disabled individuals who are going into post-secondary university or community college get into their program and end up with problems later on because they didn't have the proper assessment through an employment agency that deals with disabled individuals. And the fear that we're having is that some of these people are, if they eliminate the disabled individual programs or employment agencies and put them in the mainstream, that these people may fall through the cracks. Is there any possibility that those associations for employment of disabled individuals will be eliminated and put into the mainstream program?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting, as late as I think it was yesterday, I met with representatives from some of the organizations that provide training and support services to persons with disabilities. And you may be aware that we're actually doing a review, because we inherited a number of those agencies and organizations from the federal government, plus we already had a system in Nova Scotia that supported the same population. And so we are currently reviewing all of that to see how we can, as in every other publicly funded organization, we just want to make sure that there's as much money allocated for direct support to persons with disabilities as possible. So we are working with those organizations in terms of how best to deliver those services. As well, we have some dedicated funding that we provide, I believe, to universities to provide accommodations and support for persons with disabilities. So, you know, both at post-secondary and through our training programs, we're trying to be very sensitive and to free up as much money as possible for direct support. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
If we're going to use these individuals, these marginalized individuals, more and more to hopefully capture the opportunities that are available in the province, will there be more money available for adaptive services for workplaces and or education institutions?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot of detail on amounts or anything, but certainly we're very aware of the significance and importance of those adaptive measures, the aids, the accommodations, the workplace mentors and coaches and whatnot, and getting the best mix of those, and also being responsive to the unique needs of individuals. You know, some people need more support, others less. Some need the support at the beginning of their training or when they start a new workplace situation. Others need ongoing support throughout that period of time. So those are some of the very questions that we are reviewing and working alongside our service delivery system. We work very closely with the Department of Community Services on many of those issues as well. And those discussions and analysis is going on right across government and also with the community and provincial organizations outside of government. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If in educating disabled persons in the province is going to get people off the community services system, could the money that's saved in the community service system be transferred over into the education of a disabled individual so that they can improve and be active members in the work community?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Well, certainly the focus within Labour and Advanced Education is to provide every opportunity and support possible for people who want to work, who want to be trained and have a good paying job. And it's interesting, I've had a little personal experience in my home constituency where we created an organization that included all levels of government, both politicians and staff, as well as the business community and the voluntary sector and the Community Health Board. And we surveyed clients who were going to a hot meal program, and many of them were persons with disabilities, or they were mental health consumers. And almost to a person, they all identified as wanting to get out and have meaningful work as a goal in their lives. And so, you know, I can't answer from the Department of Community Services perspective, but certainly I think that people who have disabilities value work for because they want to be contributing members of society, and also, you know, work can bring you know, pleasure and meaning to one's life. And I think plus because they, you know, would earn more money, it gives them choices and options in life as well. And it's very, very difficult to survive on low income in any jurisdiction across Canada. So I think there are a number of motivators, and I think it's in the individual client's best interest when they identify that that is a goal, a personal life goal of theirs to help them. But you know, I don't think any any department of government is in a position of wanting to force people into a situation where they don't feel comfortable, they're not supported, or that is not what they want to do. So we're working with people's own motivation, own interests, and building on their assets and strengths to support them to go back to work when they've identified that as a goal, a personal goal. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
So the employment agencies or employment services that are dealing with disabled individuals in the province, very important, obviously. Mainstream employment services are very important as well. What I found is when a person goes through a mainstream employment service for an education aspect of it, they're not getting the proper evaluation that they deserve in order to see if they need adaptations, to see if they need extra supports in the classroom. So can we assume that those employment agencies will be maintained in the province in some one form or another?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say that our overarching objective is to improve services for all Nova Scotians. And we're trying to get the right mix of model for service delivery and also the right mix of supports. So we're doing a number of things. We're looking at necessary standards and providing support if necessary to help organizations meet those standards. We're also looking at what the right mix or model might be in terms of some of the employment agencies serve the whole population, including persons with disabilities. And then in some communities you have specialized services that only work with persons with disabilities or some other subpopulation within Nova Scotia. So the questions you're asking are the very questions that we're having discussions with these organizations, and we don't have the menu of models and service delivery. There's no predetermined outcome of that, except the driving motivation is we want efficiencies, we want excellence, because we want to be able to provide as much resources, both human and financial, to persons who need those supports. So it's trying to improve the system and the options for our citizens out there. That is the motivation behind this. But I don't have all the answers because we're in the middle of the review. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
On page 15.2, there's an increase in labour services by about $67,000. Can you tell me where those increases are going to?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you. That covers increases in salaries for the Workers' Advisors Program. Those are recovered from the Workers' Compensation Board. So it's more a bookkeeping, the transfer? Just increases in salaries.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Last question is an easy one. So can I be assured that some of the services that are offered to disabled people will still be offered to them, even if it's found that agencies have to be combined or whatever? Because I think the people who are providing the service for the disabled people are better able to provide services for able people than it is for able services to provide people services for disabled people. So I'm hoping that that'll get a lot of consideration if anything has to change from what's presently offered.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
mean, some of this falls under the Department of Community Services as well as Labour and Advanced Education, but I know we share the common goal of trying to improve services for all Nova Scotians, and that certainly will include persons with disabilities. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you very much. I want to turn the rest of my time over to my colleague from Victoria the Lakes. Thank you.
Now recognize the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity this evening to ask some questions to the Minister concerning her portfolio. You know, Labour and Advanced Education is a large portfolio to have, and there's a lot of divisions. So I'm going to ask the Minister for both her indulgence and her forgiveness if I'm all over the place when I'm asking this. So, pardon me. I guess the first question for you, Madam Chair, to the Minister is, as Labour and Advanced Education critic, about a year ago, I guess I met with members of the NSGEU Health and Safety and Environment Committee, and at that time, I believe they had some concerns and I think questions to you as the Minister, and I believe that as of today, they haven't gotten a response. So I'm going to ask these questions to you now, and hopefully you might be able to answer them. The first question is, when will the department be finalizing and proclaiming the indoor air quality regulations?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The honourable member raises a good question, and I've actually, with senior officials, had a number of serious discussions over the last couple of weeks about how we can coordinate a number of issues that have come up around safety and standards, and we're currently looking at how to develop a strategy to meet some of those. As the member can appreciate, certainly our government places top priority on a safe workplace for workers. And it's as important as having good paying jobs, you need a safe workplace. But everything you do or don't do that affects employers and employees you know, has all kinds of repercussions and sort of a ripple effect. So I know some of these discussions have been going on for some years, and I think it's happened in isolation. I actually have a meeting coming up, I'm not sure, it may even be tomorrow, with the Occupational Health and Safety Committee of the NSGEU. I meet with them on an annual basis officially, and then have other meetings with individuals in between. And I know there's 3 or 4 issues that we talk about every time we meet. I think this year will be the 3rd meeting. Certainly, there are important issues that they raise. They're very complex. They impact on so many different people. So we're trying to work out a coordinated way of moving forward on a number of fronts to do with workplace safety, how it's structured, relationships with the Workers' Compensation Board, and safety, I can't remember the name, but there's a safety group provincially. So one of the options we're seriously considering is developing a technical working group. And air quality will be one of the issues on it. So we're looking individually at these issues, but we're also trying to see how we can move forward on a broader, more comprehensive approach. So I'm sorry I don't have more detail, but it's it's a significant issue, but it is extremely complex. And it has a number of, as I said, a number of different impacts, and we just have to be very careful in how we move forward. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister. I believe you are correct that you will be meeting with them the group tomorrow because I will also be meeting with them at some point, as we do yearly, and I believe the critic for the Liberal Party meets with them as well. And because we just go over the things that they've been presenting to you, I guess. And I'm aware too that the committee wrote you a letter, I believe, on April 4th, mentioning those points that hadn't been addressed. So the second question that they had was a commitment, and it's concerning bullying and harassment and the definition. So I guess their question is, will you commit to changing the definition of bullying and harassment under the definition of workplace violence? So that I know that that's another concern that they had, and I wonder if you could speak to that.
The Honourable Minister for Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, bullying and psychological harassment are important issues. And our department views those less of a regulatory matter as more of a human resource management issue. And certainly, we're deliberating on what we can do to encourage employers and unions and other employee groups to take the matter more seriously, to perhaps develop, policies or internal ways of dealing with that. Just as cyberbullying, we had the task force on that, and I think the recommendations that came out of the task force just reaffirmed how much bullying is integrated right across society and everything we do and don't do. And I think we can probably agree that the same wide range of factors would impact on workplace bullying and psychological harassment. Again, it's a very complex issue. Certainly, within government, we have a respectful workplace policy, which I think mitigates against it. And I think there are probably things that government and other employers can do to lead by example. There's certainly models out in private business as well as public organizations that are best practices along this. So, I think education, awareness, and just less tolerance by society generally will impact on some of this. But certainly, I'm sure I'm going to be having this discussion, with that particular group. They have been very. I have to commend them because they actually have developed a tool, an anti-bullying resource manual. And I've read it. It's extremely well done. And I know that they put anti-bullying workshops on across their workplaces. We're certainly looking into the possibility of encouraging very strongly the inspectors and other staff of the Department of Labour and Advanced Education to become engaged and take those workshops. They're extremely well organized. They have a lot of excellent content. So, we're taking small steps, but certainly we recognize the seriousness of the issue.
The Honourable Member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you, Minister. I'm sure you can appreciate the frustration and concern that the committee has, because this has been going on, I think, for a couple of years that they've been requesting all these items, and they are of concern to the committee and indeed to the union. And I realize that it's small steps, and it's very serious issues that they're talking about. But I think the fact that they are not getting updates as to where things stand, if there was a better line of communication, possibly, and maybe you're doing that. I don't know. I'm not going to say that you're not communicating with them. That'd be very unfair of me to do that. But again, there are items that have been on the docket. I know that I've been critic for Labour and Advanced Education for the last 2 years, and I know that these same items have been there. So I guess it's important that they know what, if any, progress has been made in that 2-year period. So I'm just going to ask the last question that they had, and that's when will you be finalizing and proclaiming the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee's training regulations? That's a long title, I know, but if you could respond to that, please.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We certainly recognize the need for training standards for members of the JOSH committees, and you know, we're looking at the possibility of bringing those regulations forward that set minimum standards. I have to put a little bit of context around this. Some of the issues that the NSGEU have been discussing with you and me on a regular basis, just as an indication of their complexity, some of them have actually been on various governments' agendas for like 8, 9, 10 years. So these are not new issues. You know, we're watching carefully what happens in other jurisdictions as well. And we're always mindful of the fact that as with so many important issues, there's a shared responsibility, and we have to be careful as governments not to assume total responsibility for some things. So it's just trying to get the best mix of reinforcing the shared responsibility, putting the supports, providing the necessary education and awareness on some of these issues, and at the same time recognizing the importance of workplace safety. So although they sound fairly simplistic, I'm sure you appreciate just how complex some of them are. And it's not for lack of interest that we're not having faster progress on this. But as I said, we're trying to put a number of these issues together, perhaps in a longer term, you know, more comprehensive strategy. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, Minister, I think we could all appreciate the complexity of this. And I guess it's important that the committee realize that there is some advancement taking place, you know, in addressing their concerns. And I think it's important that they know that and where the status of each of those concerns might be. And I'm sure that when you meet with them tomorrow, those same concerns will be coming forward, and it's important that there be an open line of communication as to each step is made. I sense, because of the fact that it's been there, and you're correct, it's not just something that just happened. It has been there for a number of years, but I think that the question is probably saying, you know, how serious is everybody in this whole thing and getting it done? And I think it's important that, I think they realize the complexities of it too, but it's important that they know that it's not just pushed to a side, that indeed there are steps being looked at or being taken, and that those steps be communicated to them. So again, I will probably be discussing these in greater detail with the committee tomorrow, as will you. So I'm going to move now, if I can, before I start getting into budget lines, to first contract arbitration. And I'm sure you expected that at some point somebody, especially from our caucus, would be asking these questions. So I want to go back to when discussion on first contract arbitration started. and the study day that took place. And we know the history of that many feel they weren't invited to participate in the study day and so on and so forth. I guess one of the biggest concerns through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister is the fact that the department didn't tell participants of the study day that they had already drafted a legislation based on the Manitoba model. And I'm just wondering, was that ever mentioned to the participants in that study day? And if not, why?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair. I'm really stretching my memory here a little bit, but I'm trying to think of the sequencing. But there have been several versions of a first contract bill around for some time. As opposition, I'm not sure, but I believe our party actually introduced 2 private member bills on first contract. And it's not unusual when an issue is being discussed in government to do the jurisdictional scan and just see what legislation is in place across Canada. So I can't remember exactly when I first saw perhaps a later draft of the legislation. But what I can say is that the consultation process was genuine. I actually met, I'm trying to think, about 10 days before the study day with representatives of business organizations and major associations and some businesses in this province at my department, and I made them aware. We talked about a number of issues, but I made them aware of the study day, and I explained to them quite frankly that there had been very little response from business. And I encouraged them, and they gave me various reasons. They thought it was short notice, and some of them were traveling and whatever. So I strongly encouraged them to find a representative from their either association or business to attend the study day. And I'm very pleased that many of them did make that extra effort and made sure that they had a representative there. And in fact, it was oversubscribed. So, there was a mix of unionized, non-unionized, employer and employee representatives that day. And I was there just at the beginning to welcome everyone. And I believe the agenda was discussed, and then I left because I felt it important that there be no political representatives there, that this was meant to be a forum of brainstorming with the people there. And as a result of the discussion that day, as a result of the suggestions from opposition parties and from the law amendments process, the final draft of the bill became a very much made in Nova Scotia piece of legislation. It has some unique features that are not found in any piece of legislation across Canada, and I think we can be very proud that we developed a process through which we had input and advice and information that enabled us to draft a final piece of legislation that more uniquely fits the needs here in Nova Scotia. So just getting back to your comment about the bill, I don't remember at what point, quite frankly, I was aware of the bill. Certainly, I know there was an analysis done showing the highlights, the main points of various models of legislation across Canada, and they were thoroughly discussed that on the study day as well. So every part of that consultation, the discussion paper that went out, trying to remember, I read all the presentations made. I think there were around 30 of them. About half were from labor groups or unionized business, and the other half were from non-unionized business. And there certainly was a fair representation of the various perspectives and points of view. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Minister mentioned that after listening to after the study day and the consultation that took place, and did mention law amendments, and I think it's important that we note that from what we heard at the Law Amendments Committee, the concerns that were brought forward by businesses like Michelin and Sobeys were never considered when the final draft of that bill came through, and I think it's important to note that. Madam Chair, we see through a FOIPOP obtained by Business Group that the idea of first contract arbitration went to Cabinet in 2010, long before the bill actually came into effect, and actually months before the Labour Management Review Committee was created. So I guess my question would be, you know, it came to Cabinet in 2010, then it goes on to forming a Labour Management Review Committee, and then the bill comes forward. So I'd like the Minister, I have to ask why it was brought up in Cabinet in 2010 and the steps forward from there.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to be very careful here because I'm sure all members in the House understand that what goes before Cabinet, what's discussed at Cabinet is confidential. And but if I could just talk theoretically, certainly when any issue is even being considered, whether to go ahead, pull back, wait, revise, whatever, initiate it, there has to be some research, something to work from. It's not just talked about at any level of government without having done some initial research or just having something to respond to or to work from. And that's a usual practice in government. I'm not saying that's what happened. But I can guarantee that at each stage, the study day, the initial consultation I had with business, and I had meetings also with the LMRC, the study day, the discussion paper, the consultation that was on the website, and that anybody, any organization, any business, any individual in this province could respond to. There needed to be something to respond to. And all that information, all the responses went into the final product. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, Minister, I do respect there is confidentiality within Cabinet, but the idea of first contract arbitration came from somewhere. So I guess my question is going to be point blank, where did it come from? The idea of first contract arbitration.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. It came from a long-time interest. As I said, 2 private member bills from the NDP were introduced over the last 10 years or so. I don't know the actual dates. I'm guessing like 2003, perhaps 2007, somewhere in there, on first contract. And so, you know, it's been an item of interest for our party for some time. Certainly, you know, first contract has been introduced by political parties of every persuasion across this country, and it's not necessarily identified with any, excuse me, political party, because it's seen as one small tool to ensure as much labor stability in any jurisdiction.
The Honourable. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll give the Minister a chance to get rid of her tickle. I'm still going to talk at this point a little bit further on first contract arbitration. I'm wondering if the Minister has, I'm slowly, I just want to make sure I get a nod here that it's okay before I ask the question and expect her to get up. So, has the Minister had any meetings with Michelin since they appeared before the Law Amendments Committee last year?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I personally, as Minister, have not had any discussions since that legislation was passed, but I am aware that my deputy went on a trip to South Carolina, sorry, to meet with Michelin officials to talk about training needs. So that's, you know, I believe those discussions are still underway, but no, I as Minister, I have not had any meetings since then. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that. I guess when you bring up South Carolina, that's just a lead-in to what I'm going to say next, because Michelin has come out and said that because of the policies and the first contract arbitration that's here in Nova Scotia, that it's not really pro-business, that it's anti-business, and they said they're investing more in their U.S. plants because some of those states are pro-business. We saw what happened in Hungary. They said they were not pro-business, they were anti-business, and they closed down plants. But in the same time, they expanded the plant, hired 500 additional people, and have said that they don't have any immediate plans for expansion in Nova Scotia because of the business climate and first contract arbitration that exists here. So, you know, it's a very serious situation, and we heard in law amendments from the Sobeys, from the Clearwaters, and even some of the smaller employers throughout this province, and they did form a group, as you are aware, that spoke out against the first contract arbitration bill that came forward. So I guess further to my question as to whether or not you as Minister have met with Michelin, have you met with that collection of businesses and business representatives since implementing first contract arbitration?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
There had been some discussion about a meeting early this year, which never got off the ground, where I would be meeting with the employer roundtable. The deputy certainly has met with the co-chairs of the roundtable. And members of that roundtable would be meeting with various members, you know, various ministers across departments, depending on, you know, the issue that they're interested in. I have offered to meet with them. I meet with individual members of the roundtable on a more regular basis because they are part of our stakeholder group, and they often set up meetings to meet with me one-on-one. But as the collective, no, I can't say that that there has been has been any meeting. And I just want to remind folks that I find the discussion and focus on first contract very, very interesting because it actually, if you look at a pure perspective on collective bargaining, we've actually limited the collective bargaining and the right to strike for employers and employees, for unions in this first contract situation. In order to provide that foundational first piece so that it would actually mitigate against, polarization, if there was a situation where a new employer wasn't familiar with collective bargaining, we go in right away as soon as the site is certified to offer an education piece so people better understand their roles, what supports we have within our department. We have done all of this in an attempt to stabilize labor relations in this province. And I try to appreciate the fears of small, medium, and large businesses around this. Certainly, the number of union certifications has not gone up this year. It's business as usual, except we have this additional protection in place, this additional support to allow a first-time unionized workplace, both the union and the employer, to reach a settlement through collective bargaining as much by themselves as possible, and then the supports are in there if the process breaks down. So I would think this is a win-win for business and labor in this province. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a lot of concern out there that quite possibly the reason the government passed first contract arbitration in the first place was because the government didn't want groups applying to decertify. So I'm going to ask the minister if that was the real reason.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say I'd never even heard that theory until it was suggested by one of the opposition parties some time ago. No, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't remember the name, but certainly some very well-known researchers in the States have analyzed first contract legislation, both in Canada and the United States. And, their conclusion was that it is supportive of stability in labor relations in a jurisdiction, and that the fears that people have expressed have not been borne out over the decades of experience that some jurisdictions have had, both within Canada and in the United States. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, you say that first contract arbitration, the purpose of it is to have some stability. Can you provide me with an example of what has happened in the past year that has actually enhanced the stability of the workforce in the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure what you're asking, so I'll try to answer. The reason that there was no issue or crisis that triggered this legislation, and in fact, the timing was around the fact that there was no major disruption that we were responding to. We did it in a period of relative stability in order to ensure that you know, it wouldn't be seen as a knee-jerk reaction to some individual or situation. And but if you're asking in a more general sense, like, so nothing major has happened. All the employers who are represented around the round table continue to meet with officials in my department, in Economic and Rural Development and Tourism. Many of them are represented on the Premier's Economic Advisory Committee. They are involved in a number of the advisory committees that report to me on a number of different issues. So there's been no change in the relationship. There's been no, you know, negative result from this. The number of certifications, I think, is somewhere between 7 and 9, which is very similar for the first quarter of last year. And I think probably the most positive thing in terms of you know, what's happened in terms of affecting the economy certainly has been the shipbuilding contract. Like the very next day, we were hearing stories about properties just being bought like that. People coming in from the province and paying the asking price or more. And, you know, there's been it's been a confidence builder, even though, you know, there haven't been any direct new jobs, as I understand it, and perhaps won't be for a couple of years. There is so much energy, excitement, planning, more collaboration, more openness. There's more partnerships going on. It's been a wonderful experience, and certainly, you know, every time that, you know, we're either in a social or a business setting, and we meet with small, medium, and large employers and their representatives, they are very positive about what this government is doing to support business and the economy in Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You say that first contract arbitration is a confidence builder in relation to the shipbuilding. I think what the confidence building is the fact that Irving, because of the reputation, were able to win that contract. And the fact that because of Irving's business knowledge and their track record, that's what built the confidence in Nova Scotia. First contract arbitration, I would like to say, in my view, is not what built confidence. It's the abilities of Irving that built the confidence in this. You say there has been no effect, and I think yesterday during question period, Minister, Egg Studios was talked about. And Egg Studios, as you know, is a prominent Nova Scotia success story, and it employs freelance workers, but they could be seriously impacted by Bill 100. So, you know, if everything's been so good, why is the minister willing to risk such an important, successful, innovative business here in Nova Scotia with first contract arbitration?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
I don't have a lot of knowledge on this particular issue, but I do know that you know, government and the department set up the legal process. The outcomes were determined by the independent tribunal, the Labour Board. The process is ongoing, and I would suggest it's probably inappropriate for me to say much more about this now.
The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The minister in question period on Wednesday talked about the new applications for certification that had been filed, and you did say 9. And so I guess I'm wondering, are those applications in the construction industry, the non-construction industry, both? What are those applications, if you could elaborate on those, please?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
I'm just trying to remember. It seems to me about half of them actually were in the what I call the near public sector, like nonprofits or whatever, and I believe the other half were businesses. I could get the names of the business for you. I just don't have them with me tonight. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if the Minister could do that, that would be really appreciated. I just want to comment on a couple of things. The Minister said that she had never heard discussion on decertifying before. And we, as a party, have never brought it up before, but it actually came from media accounts on your own documents that were FOIPOP. So there was decertified that was mentioned there. So again, that's I'm not going to get in an argument with you about it. So I guess before I close out discussion on first contract arbitration, you mentioned there was stability and you wanted to put first contract arbitration forward for stability. So why would you do that when things were already stable in the first place? Does that make sense?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably for a couple of reasons. There had been, we were watching what happens across Canada, and you know, certainly we know that 85% of the workforce in Canada is already covered under some model, some form of first contract, and certainly there had been circumstances in the past in this province where problems in reaching a first contract through the regular collective bargaining process had caused considerable labor disruption. And, you know, this is something that we would want to avoid in the future. So because things were fairly quiet, and because there had been long experience across many jurisdictions with various forms of a first contract, it just made sense to do it at a time of relative stability, as, you know, anticipating that, you know, we wanted the economy to be have the most supports possible during these very difficult economic times. So, you know, it's just a combination of reasons, but the timing seemed right. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes with 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the certification applications that were received, and the Minister said it was 9, but I do have a monthly breakdown here since January, and if I could, with everyone's indulgence, I see under Part 1, Section 23, in January there was 1, February there was 1, March 2, and April, as of April 11th, 4. So that gives me 8 on that side. And under Part 2, Section 95, for those same 4 months, January 1, February 5, March 1. So that's another 7. So that's actually 15 applications that have been made. I stand to be corrected on that if you would like to comment on it, please.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd have to get the breakdown, but I'm pretty sure that many of those certifications were in process before first contract came into effect. But as I said, we will get that information, and I'll get you the list of actual companies and nonprofits, and hopefully that will clarify the situation. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I realize my time is getting short. I only have about a minute left, so I'm going to put in one quick one because I didn't really jump all over the place. I stayed on the Labour side of it, I guess. This one here is concerning advanced education and about NASCAD. And I'm going to ask the Minister, why did the Department bury the 2010 HOG report on NASCAD and order a whole new one in 2011 by Howard Windsor.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Well, the report was never buried. Information from that report, information from Dr. O'Neill's report, and the Howard Windsor report were all used to inform the development of the process with NASCAD. And certainly, since the Hogg report, the financial situation with NASCAD had worsened. They were continuing to go over budget, to come to the government and ask for additional funding. You know, over the last 2 or 3 years, we had to put in $6 million extra in order to allow them to meet their budget requirements. So the situation had worsened. It was obvious that there were other factors at play, and it seemed important to refresh the analysis on their financial situation and what possible options they would have to live within their budget. Thank you.
The time has elapsed for the Progressive Conservative Party. I would now recognize the honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the minister need a couple minutes just to take a quick break? We're okay. I guess I'll ask a couple questions around accessibility measures, or perhaps some accessibility programs that the department's engaged in. It gets confusing when you talk about access, because usually affordability and access in everyone's mind are kind of all lumped together, but they are pretty distinct things, where affordability helps, you know, keep debt levels down, and access is actually about getting new students into the system, students who aren't currently participating. And in Nova Scotia, I know we have certain demographics of students that are underrepresented in our post-secondary system. And I'm wondering if the minister could highlight which students currently aren't accessing post-secondary education to their maximum potential, and what accessibility measures is the department taking to reach out to those groups and to bring them into our post-secondary system so that their participation rates are actually going up.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can probably answer one part of that better than the other part, but we can get additional information. Most of my knowledge about the participation rates is about Canadian participation. And I do know that Nova Scotia has the highest participation rates in Canada, despite the fact that it wasn't until a few years ago that we froze tuition and actually have now capped it. So for the previous, 15, 20 years, we had in Nova Scotia among the highest tuition rates in Canada. But despite that, we have the highest, did I say tuition rates? We have the highest participation rates. And so this just goes to prove the point that there actually is no direct relationship between participation and tuition rates. So, for example, if you look at Quebec and Newfoundland Labrador, they have the lowest tuition in Canada, and their participation rates at university are much lower than ours here in Nova Scotia. Now, what I don't have is the actual breakdown in terms of Nova Scotian participation rates in Nova Scotian universities or in Canadian universities, and I believe that information is available. I just don't. I'm not familiar with it, because we have found, and certainly this has been borne out in research everywhere, that there are a number of other factors that seem to have be higher determinants of whether someone is interested or able or motivated to go to university. And interestingly, one of them is the distance that their home community is from a university site. And so I think this plays very well in Nova Scotia because of our 11 universities spread out across the province, that actually is quite a motivator for people from the region, from across Nova Scotia to attend university. But probably more important is indicator is whether or not the parents, one or more of the parents, has attended university. And certainly there's a much higher correlation between parents' participation at post-secondary and their offspring. You know, they provide, you know, family encouragement. The expectations from a young age are, you know, study, do well in school. You know, in our family, we go on to university. So there are many determinants, and certainly they all need to be considered. That's one reason why, you know, we're trying to encourage through our public school programming and mentorships and supports people to expect to go on to post-secondary. And as I think you mentioned earlier, 75% of new jobs in Nova Scotia are going to require some form of post-secondary education and training. So it is critical that people start looking at lifelong learning and don't see public school education as the end of that period of learning and training. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister. And the Minister is right. The evidence would show that there isn't a direct correlation between tuition levels and participation of underrepresented groups. What tuition does affect, of course, is affordability, debt, and costs. And those things do impact completion rates, but they don't necessarily impact increasing participation rates for underrepresented students. And the Minister did a very good job of articulating a number of the determinants that professionals in the field have identified. One of the things that we know is that students are making their minds up at a much earlier age than previously thought, whether they're going to go to a university or college or not. Oftentimes it's happening even in elementary school. And so if we're going to actually, it's not just a matter of throwing money at the issue and thinking that because there's money in the system that these individuals are going to go to university or college. We learned that with, I think, the Millennium Scholarship Foundation, which isn't in existence anymore, but they did a pilot project here in Nova Scotia, I believe, a number of years ago, where they had a bunch of money that was directed towards students from low-income backgrounds, and the money didn't get used because students weren't picking up. So that was an indication that something else is going on here other than money. And so I guess my question is, we only have a few minutes left. The evidence shows that early outreach is of absolute importance when it comes to helping these students decide to choose higher education as a path. A concern that I raised in the House, NSCC had a program in place. I think there was 8 outreach officers, I forget what the exact title was, that were in, I think, junior high schools, and their job was to, you know, serve as mentors and provide guidance to students and open up in their minds the possibility of post-secondary education, in particular NSCC. Because of the cuts that we've seen to the core funding of education, those officers were cut. NSCC chose to cut those services. So what is your department doing in terms of early outreach to get out there to our youth at a very young age, change their minds about what their potential future could be, and to address this now gap in the system with the NSCC outreach officers being cut? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that actually was the job description for those liaison folks, but I'm going to stick to what I do know. Certainly we, through Labour and Advanced Education, have a number of different initiatives to reach into the public school program, but also to reach into those marginalized groups who perhaps have not seriously considered post-secondary training either through community college or university. So we have a number of students involved in our Nova Scotia Adult School for Adult Learning. That improves access because, you know, when they graduate from that, especially the schools that are affiliated with the community colleges, they are very highly motivated, and it's very easy to transition into community college programming. We also have a fund called Skills Up for African Canadians. It started, I believe, about a year ago, and it is giving special focus and support for African Canadians. We're increasing access at the community college system for underrepresented groups, as I mentioned earlier. In terms of universities, by increasing the upfront grants, that is encouraging people to go on. We have support programs for persons with disabilities, both at community college and universities. We have grants for students who have dependent children, and we're improving our outreach to students. So we're strengthening the careers information. Excuse me, and parents as career coaches. That's broadening into elders as career coaches. Excuse me, allergy season. We have opportunities, O2 in the high schools, and placements in you know, business and labs and work placements. There certainly there's much more interest in attending community college than I think there's ever been in the history of the college. So people understand the value of community college programming. And now the challenge is to accommodate everybody who wants to go there. So there's been incredible work on all fronts to reinforce the value of post-secondary education, the value of lifelong learning, and to make it easier in terms of transitioning from public school into to community college and universities. And certainly the great expansion of trades courses and the new manufacturing program in public education will also, you know, create an enthusiasm and an interest in those areas. So there's a lot going on to deal with that issue. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thanks for the information, Minister. And just to emphasize the importance of early outreach, I just hope that it stays, it remains a focus in the department, because if we are going to make our higher education institutions more accessible to those folks, that's how we're going to do it. Investment in early outreach. There is, excuse me, a really interesting program, Pathways, in Ontario. I'm not sure if the minister is familiar with it. They went into one of the inner city school districts, and this school in particular, I think they had a 50% graduation rate. It was really low. And I think the number of folks that were actually participating in higher education was even in the you know 8 to 10% from the high school. And I know we're running out of time here, but I suggest the department take a look at the model that was used at Pathways in Toronto, and try to learn from the success that they've had there, and just to take a look at it, and hopefully we could learn something and maybe bring in a new program here where we can have some success. Anyway, we're running out of time, Minister, but thanks again for taking the time and closing out estimates with me. It's always fun. And as I said before, I think the department has made a number of positive initiatives. I think that we're nowhere near where we should be in terms of tuition and ensuring that you know, tuition costs
Order,
are down.
please. The time allotted for today's consideration of supply has elapsed. I now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I wish you to now leave and report progress.
Motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report progress to the House. Order, please. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply reports
That the Committee of the Whole House on Supply has made very considerable progress. And begs
very
the-
considerable. Thank you. I now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, it's hard to follow a line like that, Madam Chair, so I think the government will call it a night.
Very
Mr. Speaker-
considerably.
Mr. Speaker, that's our, Madam Speaker, that ends the government's business for today. I wish the House to now rise to meet from the hours of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And after daily routine, we will do supply. And after supply, we will maybe have some joyous bell ringing. And after that, we will go into bills for second, public bills for second reading. 5, 9, 11, 13, 17, 20, 22, 24, 30, 32, 34, 37, 39, 41, 52, 55, 59, and 61. I wish the House to now rise, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is that we do now rise to meet again tomorrow, April the 27th, between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned.